Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are from and whatever time of day it is. Welcome back to the Charlie K YouTube channel. My name is Charlie K, just in case you needed reminding. I know it's been a few weeks. And today I want to discuss sort of what's going on around Forest at the moment and why ultimately I still believe that Nottingham Forest will survive the drop and stay up in the Premier League this season. Before we do get into this, please do like and subscribe. It means the absolute world to me, and let's get into it. So first of all, I wanted to kick off with a match review of the Brentford game, and this is probably the weirdest game of the season for Forest fans, I would think, because although we got a 96th minute equaliser, it didn't feel like that victory that so often a late equaliser does. There was something missing, and I think we all know what it was. The disgraceful decisions made by VAR. I think the biggest topic when looking at the game in retrospect is obviously going to be the VAR decisions. Obviously the penalty given for Brentford over Dean Henderson's shin tap of the opposing Brentford striker, and then the 3 or 4 that weren't given to Forest when realistically, especially the one at the edge of the box against Dennis, I think in 90% of games, none of them are penalties. But when you give the Brentford one and then don't give any of the Forest ones, the consistency has to be brought into question. What is, what isn't a penalty? And I'm not even sure officials know. It's bizarre. Unless it's clear and obvious, it shouldn't be picked up, and yet it is. The original decision on Dean Henderson's foul was that it wasn't a penalty. They were getting ready for that to be a goal kick, and then suddenly VAR said, actually, we're not so sure about that. But it took about 2 or 3 minutes for that decision to be made, and then you think, if it's taking 2 or 3 minutes, is it clear and obvious? And that's my problem, because I don't think any of Forest's 3 penalty shouts were clear and obvious. But if Brentford's was, then all 3 of Forest's are stronger claims. It's as simple as that. If you're going to give Brentford's, you give all 3 of Forest's, realistically. So that's my problem with that. But we'll move on from VAR for now. And there are 3 other things I want to talk about in the game. First of all, obviously Biancone being injured before that. I think if you've watched my channel before, you'll know how excited I am about him. And the fact he's out for the rest of the season is pretty heartbreaking, really, because he had such a fantastic pre-season and didn't really get to show what he could do in a Forest shirt this year. And be it the Championship or the Premier League, we're going to have to wait an entire year now to see him return. So, hoping Biancone gets well soon. If you do watch this video, on the very off chance that you do watch any Forest related content, Gillian, get well soon. Now, moving on to the second talking point, and it is that Serge Aurier. I've called it a scorpion slip. I don't know if he meant it or not, but it is the best piece of defending I have ever seen. I'll put a clip above this now, just so you guys can see it if you haven't already. And let me know in the comments, was it deliberate or wasn't it? In my opinion, it was. I think there's a slight look back and a very, very calculated move, but who knows? And then finally, and the biggest talking point for me aside from VAR, is Morgan Gibbs-White is finally starting to show exactly what he can do. The guy is young as it is, he's only going to get better, and that performance on Saturday was an absolute masterclass. I think on the ball, I've never seen a player for Forest in my 21 years on this planet who looks so comfortable and so skillful and could create something from nothing, as he did with his goal. But we've seen it a few times this season already, those quick turns and the intricate dribbling that we've sort of wanted to see more of throughout a consistent 90 minutes. Saturday he did that. And that was so pleasing to see, and I am really excited to see how he progresses in a Forest shirt. So now we're going to look ahead to Saturday's game against Crystal Palace, who have just come off of a 2-1 win against West Ham. And in that 2-1 win, they looked very convincing. If you look on their player ratings online, I think there's only 2 players, I think centre-back and the goalkeeper as well, are the only 2 below like a 7 rating. It is insane, because that is a consistent level of high performance across the entire team. It's slightly worrying that we've got to play them on Saturday, because I think that front 3 of Eze, Elise and Zaha is very fast. And when you've got the likes of Cook and McKenna, it's a bit daunting to think they've got to face that. But when you think that Zaha, probably the paciest player, is against Aurier, I quite fancy him to be fairly quiet on Saturday, and I've totally jinxed that now. He's going to score a hat-trick, I'm really sorry. So with all that being said, I do actually think it is time to reintroduce Joe Worrell into the squad. And believe it or not, I'm not going to drop Steve Cook. I think Steve Cook has been pretty fantastic recently. I am going to drop Scott McKenna, and I don't think he's been bad, but I feel like we need someone who has got slightly more pace and slightly more agility to try and match the agility of the front three that Crystal Palace are bringing. So for me, Worrell fits in, hopefully up to match fitness. I know he's not played in a little while, but I think at least 70 minutes, 80 minutes, hold that pacey attacking line. And I think if we can transition from that with Kouyaté, who has looked astounding as well, I think his physicality against the smaller, more youthful side, and you look at Jeffrey Schlupp as well, I know he's old, but he's not very big, should be able to keep him quite quiet on Saturday. I fancy Forest to win the midfield battles, to win that physicality battle, and I think we can see some joy because of that. I feel like we've got to be more physical and more sort of aggressive than Crystal Palace have. I do think we need Awoniyi up front. I do think Anderson and Guéhi will provide a physical match, and I'm not sure Dennis is quite up to that kind of battle just at the moment, and I'd rather see him on the left wing if he's going to play anywhere. So for me, Awoniyi start, boss that defence, physical through the middle, and then have Steve Cook and a slightly more agile defender like Worrell in the centre of the back four. And now while you're here, why Nottingham Forest will survive in my opinion, and we've got to look after the World Cup for this, because no matter what happens on Saturday, the season's not going to be defined on Saturday. So after the World Cup, what can we expect from Forest? We can expect Niakhaté and Omar Richards back. And I know I've said it in a few videos before and I've sung his praises to no end, but Niakhaté returning will change the entire back line entirely. The man is the best defender in the team. He is the fastest defender we have. He is the best on the ball. It's a different dimension when we have Niakhaté in the team, and we saw that against West Ham. He is just so vital to how this team was originally meant to be set up playing, and the fact we didn't really get any cover for him has come to bite us a little bit. And then you've got to introduce Omar Richards onto the left, and I do think he starts because there is no faith shown in Lodi right now. I think Williams is ahead of him in the pecking order, and that's playing Williams on his weak foot, and Williams is probably my third choice right back realistically, after Serge Aurier and Biancone. So the fact that he's starting with his weak foot on the left highlights a little bit of lack of faith in Renan Lodi, and I don't think it's unwarranted. I think he came in with a lot of expectation, obviously a Champions League caliber player apparently, and he's not quite lived up to that reputation. I think he could come good, and there's clearly a reason why he was starting in the Champions League last year and how he got man of the match against Man United. But he's not shown that in a Forest shirt, and I don't know if he's not fitting in with the system or he's just not bothered about being here because he knows realistically in the summer, no matter how he performs, his name is enough to carry him into a top 8 club probably in most leagues. Yeah, I don't see fully how Renan Lodi gets back into the squad with the return of Omar Richards, who was one of our initial signings, if not our first, I believe. He was our second after Awoniyi, I believe. He was part of the plan from the start. This man was brought in by Cooper and Murphy. This is absolutely not a rash sort of last minute decision kind of thing. This was a thought out, processed transfer. And you look at how he played in the Championship for Reading, you look at his few performances against Bayern Munich, if you go on, just look at a highlights reel for example, fantastic. He's fast, he's comfortable on the ball, his actual distribution is phenomenal. So I am really looking forward to seeing how Omar Richards can help Forest on that left side where actually we do look a little bit more vulnerable. So if you add those two to the back line, as well as possibly an introduction of another attacking option, one of the wings, I do think Forest will have enough to stay up. I think Bournemouth are going to start to slip down. I think you're seeing that now, the sort of capitulation at Leeds. I think their confidence will start to shake. I think Southampton, the imminent appointment of Nathan Jones is just bizarre. I think Jones is a rubbish manager, absolutely rubbish. I don't like him as a person anyway, but he's only good at Luton. We saw when he went to Stoke, he just didn't have any ideas. He was sacked so quickly. He was such a dead weight manager for Stoke. Southampton, if that appointment goes through, you guys are relegated. And in that last place, I think Wolves are going to take that last place. I am really not convinced at Wolves. I'm not convinced of the signing of Lopetegui either as their new manager. I don't think that's an inspiring signing. And they're relying on someone like Diego Costa to score goals, and he has looked like you may as well stick a plank of wood up front instead of Diego Costa right now. Yeah, you've got the nostalgia, and yeah, you know, it'll sell a few shirts. It's something for the history books that, can you remember when Diego Costa played for Wolves? It would be a pub quiz question in 15 years, but that's not what you want. That's not what you want keeping you up. and he's not going to keep you up. So for me, I do believe the 3 worst teams than Forest are the 3 directly above us currently in Bournemouth, Southampton and Wolves. And I do think the shoring up of the defensive line with Niakate and Richards introduced, and then a winger, possibly even bring Josh Bowler back in January if we can. I think we're set. And as a last thing, I just want to talk about how Forest can improve in general. Forget the players that are going to come in right now, who's performing well, who can improve. And I think there are 3 main things that Forest need to improve within this squad that we currently have. And I think the first one is being more clinical. I think the amount of chances we had against Brentford on Saturday is just one of the many examples we've had of this season where we could have had 4 or 5 before half time, realistically. I think there's a lack of cutting edge in front of goal, and it's possibly a lack of confidence to actually just hit that ball and just go for it. I don't think we're shooting quite as often as we should be. We're in positions, but then we're not releasing that final ball, and I think that's costing us a little bit. I think we're too afraid to have a shot outside of the box. We saw Morgan Gibbs-White get joy from doing just that, and I think that's one of the first shots I've seen Forest take outside of the box. There hasn't been a Ryan Yates flying into Rosette, but we allow that because he's brilliant. I think there needs to be a consistent striker. I think we need to choose between Dennis or Awoniyi, and I would say 90% of the fan base, I like both, 90% of the fan base, myself included, would say that Awoniyi is the starting guy. He's started 3 times for Forest at the City Ground, has 3 goals from those 3 games. I think he's just, I do believe with a consistent run, he will hit 10, 15 goals this season quite easily. So Awoniyi needs to start a bit more. I feel like then we'll become a little bit more clinical and hopefully turn these draws and close losses into points picked up. So the second thing, I do believe we need to show more commitment throughout the game. I think it's so frustrating as a Forest fan when you see, like when we went down 2-1 on Saturday, suddenly a light switched and everyone started playing really well. So they clearly have the potential to do that and the ability to do that, but they don't do that when we're comfortable. We're 1-0 up, we get 1-0 up, and then we think, okay, we're 1-0 up. We can play a little bit of nice football, we're not going to sit back, but we don't need to push quite as heavily. And then we concede, and we've done that literally every time we've been 1-0 up, I believe, this season, other than Liverpool and West Ham. And it is infuriating to see, because that little bit extra effort, which they clearly do have because then they show it when we go behind, that little bit extra effort, if we have that a little bit earlier on and go 2-3-0 up, suddenly it's harder for teams to see a way back into the game. There's no point in just giving 100%, 90% for 35 minutes and switching off for the last 10 of the half, because that's the 10 minutes they'll score, and that's what we saw on Saturday. So that's infuriating for me, but it's something very, very easy, I believe, to address. And the final thing is Dean Henderson's distribution. And I like Dean Henderson a lot, and I do think he is one of the best keepers in the league still, despite the amount of goals we're shipping. I'm not entirely sure many are his fault, but his distribution's not great. Henderson attempts 20 launched passes per 90, which is in the top 15% in the entire league. But his pass completion percentage when launched is just 29.5%, which puts him in the bottom 11% in the entire league. However, I do think in recent games there's been a bit more consideration about where he's putting it. I think he's looking for a bit more space, and is he doesn't look worried when he receives the ball back to him. I think he looks a lot calmer, and there are a few times where the Brentford fans were getting on his back on Saturday, and he calmly just kicked it out, and it was a lot more composed to what we've seen, compared to what we've seen in recent weeks. So there is progress there, but if Forest are going to improve and counter efficiently, we are going to need to see an increase in Dean Henderson's pass completion rate. And that, guys, is a very, very sort of mishmashed video about Forest's current situation and why I do believe that they are going to stay up in the Premier League this season. Call me deluded, I probably am, but I'm trying to remain positive, and I think there's a very good chance if we address what I have suggested. Leave your comments down below, let me know if you agree with what I've said. If you disagree, let me know as well. Conversation is good. But as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do hit the like button and subscribe, it means the absolute world. And I will see you in the next one. Come on, you Reds.